land was true, or that there was ever such a place as Mount Sinai. And Israeli archaeologists have made it increasingly impossible to regard any such view as tenable. Even if we took it as read, there'd be still nothing morally unique or special or first time in any of the versions, the three versions of the Old Testament Decalogue. Or perhaps there would be. Perhaps there might be. The 10th commandment prohibits all manner of covetousness and envy. And it repeats the usual lumping in of a neighbour's womenfolk with his beasts of burden. You can't covet your neighbour's ass, you can't covet your neighbour's wife or his ox. Repeating earlier injunctions about the Sabbath, which make cattle and chattel much the same thing, including human chattel. But you note that in the 10th commandment, unlike the others, there's no specific action that's being either condemned or recommended, neither enjoined nor exhorted or forbidden or prohibited. Instead, we've got the first recorded instance that I know of thought crime. It's not you're not supposed to do it, it's you're not even supposed to think about it. This is why those of us who maintain a critique of religion make the charge that it is implicitly totalitarian. It can convict you for things that are only in your head, for thoughts that have hardly begun to form. And there's another reason, I think, why this commandment is somewhat sinister. It appears to forbid the poor from resenting the rich, if you want to make a left critique of it, or if you want to approach matters from a free market point of view, it seems to crush the spirit of emulation and competition that's involved in wishing you had a better life. Some Jewish authors have argued that the prohibition only extends to actual neighbours, in the sense of those who dwell in the immediate vicinity, and some have said it only applies to covetousness of that sort, but it would surely be a fairly paltry commandment that excused this exact same attitude if it was directed at people further away. And only then do you notice, when that thought has occurred to you, in the mind that you have that's always alive with subversive thinking, you suddenly notice that the children of Israel are precisely and all the time being ordered to covet, being enjoined to covet, being told they must envy and hope to annex the lands, the flocks, the herds, and the women of neighboring tribes. They're kept going by greed, by the thought soon all these people's property will be yours, and that you'll be licensed to take it by force and kill them and have the land and not the people. This is perhaps why, this ambition is perhaps why there are no prohibitions against, say, slavery or rape or genocide or child abuse in the Ten Commandments. It's not a matter of leaving these out or applying situational ethics to a time that was not ours. It's not that, I don't think so. Such things have always been known of and usually deplored. It's more, I fear, that such terrible things as rape, enslavement, genocide and child abuse are just about to be mandatory. They're just about to be forced on people as things that they are not just must not do, but must do if the conquest is to continue. The remainder of Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, of the Pentateuch in other words, is largely taken up with exact codification of the different kinds of enslavement of Jewish servants and non-Jewish serfs, the conditions of mass murder and despoilment of other neighboring tribes. There are also incidental and, so to say, by the way, commandments such as the one to stone to death any child that disrespects its parents, and the prohibition on seething a baby goat in its mother's milk, one of those random commandments on which the whole laborious edifice of kosher and kashrut has since been raised. So let's just trace again, to be sure where we are, amid this blizzard of conflicting hysterical orders, the evolutions of the Decalogue. After the commandments specified in Exodus chapter 20 comes Exodus 21, a chapter of so-called judgments, which gives the verdict and sentence in advance for any number of crimes, from smiting to slave rebellion, and from ox goring to witchcraft. And these two have the forces of commandment, and the penalty in all cases is death. Moses then returns from his audience with God to discover his people have lapsed into calf worship and other frivolities. As I mentioned earlier, he thereupon smashes the two tablets, which would surely at that time have been the most precious artifact that could possibly have been known to man, as having been conceived and made holy by God, smashes them and summons the Levites of his contingent to inflict exemplary punishment. And I quote now from Exodus 32, verses 27 to 28. Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, so this too is a divine commandment, by the way. Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, put every man his sword by his side, and go in and out from gate to gate throughout the camp, and slay every man his brother, and every man his companion, and every man his neighbor. And the children of Levi did according to the word of Moses, and there fell of the people that day about 3,000 men. So that's a terrific slaughter under orders. And you note the small inconsistency, which may perhaps, I sometimes think, betray the prickings of a poor conscience. In the first verse, the order for the indiscriminate slaughter is from God, thus saith the Lord God of Israel. In the second, it's from Moses. The children of Levi did according to the word of Moses. There's a bit of displacement going on here, we don't know. In either case, it orders the killing of brothers, companions, and in that significant term, as we've seen from the 10th commandment, neighbors, specified. They must die without pity or without discrimination. That's not excessive, perhaps after the infanticide of the firstborn of Egypt. That's already taken place for them to get this far. And it pales beside the anger of Moses in the later book of Numbers, where he speaks to his generals after the battle against the Amalekites and rages at them for sparing so many of the civilians. Now, therefore, he says, kill every male among the little ones, and kill every woman that has known a man by lying with him. But all those women, children that hath not known a man by lying with him, keep alive for yourselves. In the Age of Reason, Thomas Paine drew attention to this passage, saying that it constituted, I'm quoting Paine, an order to butcher the boys, to massacre the mothers, and to debauch the daughters. A fairly good summary of what I've just read. And this earned him a hurt and high-minded rejoinder from the Bishop of Llandaff, a blithering Welshman who used to try to debate Paine on these questions. He didn't contest the butchery of the boys or the massacre of the mothers, but he did say very plaintively that it wasn't actually stipulated that the daughters were being kept alive for immoral purposes. In other words, the bishop left open the possibility they were being kept as, I suppose, pets. Anyway, after the Levite massacre has shown the Jews who's boss, new tablets are inscribed and presented. In Exodus 34, verse 38, these are for the first time, and the only time actually, and only in other words in the second occasion, directly referred to as the Ten Commandments. But they're almost entirely different from the first version. They are preceded by a ban on intermarriage between Jews and Canaanites, Jews and Hittites, Jews and Amorites, Jews and Jebusites, etc., lest mixing of blood should mar the covenant, so there's an early racist injunction. Then the tablets repeat the commandments concerning the Sabbath and concerning idol worship, and then everything becomes micromanagement of unleavened bread, first fruits of the harvest, etiquette to conduct around the tabernacle, the observance of Passover, and the aforementioned separation of meat from dairy products in the glatt kosher kitchen. Highly insipid when compared to the 10, 12 or 13 of 20 or so verses before, but nonetheless the only ones now remaining to the children of Israel that are written in stone, because the tablets are back. An inconsistency that so far no one's been able to explain. And thus matters persist until the 5th chapter of Deuteronomy, where Moses assembles the masses and gives them the first, that's the Exodus 20 version, all over again. That's the 5th chapter of Deuteronomy, 4 books later on, all over again. It's very nearly an exact repeat, except this time the Sabbath day is to be kept as holy, not because God made heaven and earth in 6 days and then rested on the 7th, but because God brought his people out of the land of Egypt. So it's still to be kept holy, but the reason why it's holy is entirely different. And 22 chapters later, as the Jordan River draws nearer and as the book of Deuteronomy draws to its close, there is yet a 4th set of commandments issued by Moses, who orders that they too be inscribed on stone. And these take the form of 12 curses. You should look them up, forcefully intoned by Levite priests. Cursed, for example, is he that maketh the blind to wander out of the way. Cursed is he that lies with any manner of beast. Cursed is he that lieth with his father's wife. That's, by the way, for the intriguingly Oedipal reason that he uncovereth his father's skirt. One is compelled here to re-examine the authorship of Deuteronomy, which tells us that Moses by then had reached the